Okay, quiet on set, everybody. Stand by. Roll camera. Speed. Roll sound. Speed. Mark it. And cue talent. Hello and welcome to This Week in Production, the podcast. I'm your host, Art Aldrich, and joining me via the brand new to me Squadcast app, Mr. Dan Montgomery from Imagine Products. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
Just give us a little overview on what I know what you guys do, but for the audience, tell us what Imagine Products does.
Well, we're a software publisher, and we've been in the M&E business since 1991, which means almost 30 years now. And we started out doing video logging software back before, digital stuff. It was all analog and
HD logger, right?
Before that, it was the executive producer was it was DOS logger actually for Division and those guys, and it made its way into Mac and Windows, and over time it got better and better on the analog part, and it was all about saving time and all that for digitizing, just selecting all your pre-selects before you digitized. And then when the HD revolution came along, we latched onto that and started making HD players and be able to play the video directly. And we wrote the first P2 codec for QuickTime for European format. Apple didn't have that yet. And we also did P2 player and P2 logger and all that kind of stuff for getting stuff off of P2 cards, and that morphed into things for Sony, their EX camera, their XD cam stuff. And these days we're doing mostly, file manipulation, moving files from point A to point B, offloading, archiving, transcoding, playing, uploading to the cloud, and those sorts of things. So we've been around a while. We know all the big guys, and we know LTO stuff. We know,
You guys are like the workflow glue. I mean, we use your ShotPut Pro in our workflow to offload. I've talked about it many times on the podcast, but it's sort of you have workflow tools that help productions, get their job done.
Right. And it's mostly pre-production type stuff, that and at the back end.
So your company, I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, you would fall under the category of a small business, would you?
We do not have 500 employees, no. So yeah, we're a small company.
You're a small company. And how has the COVID-19 virus affected your business at this point?
Well, about March 15th, somebody turned off the spigot. So yeah, our revenue went to zero. But that's because most of the people that we sell to are using our products on the set and out in the field shooting, and big productions and independent folks and DITs and all those kind of folks that as they shut down and close shop, then they didn't need our stuff for a while. The good news of all this is I think the big guys, the Netflixes and folks like that, they have funded projects. So they have the money, they're just waiting on the all clear to restart. The event stuff, shooting things like you shoot probably, sports and those kind of things, that's going to take a lot longer, I think, to recover. So who knows? We're just we're taking this time to pause and work on things that we, have more time to work on now from our homes.
Under normal circumstances, and I'll note that we're recording this on April 15th. Thank goodness it's not tax day, really.
Well, that's right.
But April 15th, normally we would probably both be in Las Vegas, you as an exhibitor of the NAB show, and I would be there this year as a attendee, as I've done for the past few years. Let's start with NAB show. How long have you been exhibiting there?
This would have been our 30th year.
30 years you've been exhibiting at NAB. And how would you, I mean, I'm assuming since you've done it for 30 years that NAB is a big part of your marketing and your product visibility.
Yes and no. Um, Back in the beginning, in the early days, I would say the first 20 years, it it probably drove 85% of our business. Um, and that's when you put that in perspective. That's really before people started shopping on the internet, and email was a novel thing, and all those sorts of things. And a lot of people went to NAB to shop, and then they would buy in summertime. And they got their budgets and they were figuring out what I'm going to spend my money on, and so June, July, August were really good months usually. In later years, I would say that show has become more of a networking thing, and for us at least, it's more about you know renewing friendships and meeting people that in different groups, and there's been a whole lot of parties, and there's been a whole lot of you know conference things and all that sort of stuff. I got to say that a lot of the companies that we deal with, and we deal with all the manufacturers as far as the camera manufacturers and folks like that. I'm also on the IBM America's Council, which is the International Association of Broadcast Manufacturers. So it's people that make the play out stuff, and on and on and on, all the different equipment things. We're the small company representative, I suppose. Uh, they wanted a cross section of the different types of things, but listening to those guys, and even the guy from Imagine the Communications, the new Harris Corporation guys, they've all been looking for ways to downsize their spending at NAB over the last few years, because the huge booths cost so much money, and it's a big expense. The bang for the buck, just you know you got to be there for the visibility, but on the other hand, it's not about making sales. It's truly more of a marketing experience than it is anything else.
So how do you qualify the expense versus the return on your investment?
Well, for us, we try to record a lot of things on the show floor in interviews and things like that, and have that for email blasts and blogs, and get more than that 4 days out of it, for longer term exposure. Um, Same thing as when we go to visit user groups around the country and different things. We also do IBC, the Amsterdam show, in the fall, which is more of all the European and African and Middle East type, you know, customers and companies. Um, but that's really, again, it's more about the deal making and the handshaking, and the European show for us in the past had been more about dealers and signing up dealers, and um, because most of that market tends to purchase, instead of directly, they'll purchase through a reseller or distributor. In the U.S., that's not true. For us at least, it's mostly direct sales. But yeah, those two shows were a significant part of our marketing budget, just because that's the way you reach people.
Leading up to, because NAB was I guess wishfully hoping that they could have the show, and they were not canceling the show until I guess the absolute last moment. But what were you thinking as this, COVID-19 was becoming more of a thing? Were you working on plan Bs for marketing or for outreach, or what was going through your head as this was all unfolding?
Well, um, unless you're an exhibitor, you probably don't realize how this all works. That you have to sign up for this a year in advance, right? And you're making payments. We've already paid for the booth It was 100% paid for by January, I think, something like that, December maybe. Um, and then you've got all the other expenses. You've already booked all your lodging and your airfare, and the stuff you're going to put in the booth, and all the things that go with that is all sunk cost. Um, so there's really, from about January on, there's no more things to spend money on. You've already spent it all, right? The only thing you're going to spend in April is for your meals when you're there. So the calculation on all this stuff was safety of the employees, and it wasn't really about what kind of booth traffic are we going to get. It really came down to, is this a safe thing to be doing? Um, because you don't get any money back. It's all spent, you know. Um, when I heard that AJA pulled out, I reached out to half a dozen companies that I know in the South Hall and said, look, this looks like it's going to get bad. What are you thinking? And everybody was pretty much on the same book. They were like, yeah, I don't know, because NAB was hoping for the best. And they're like, well, we're going to clean things more and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't think cleaning the doorknobs is going to help. You cannot social distance at a trade show.
Not of that size, certainly.
Right. Several of my employees have underlying health conditions, and it's like, no, no. So we were actually one of the first to pull out, I think. And I just told NAB, I said, no, I can't. We just can't do this. And they're like, well, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, so their contract does say that if they cancel the show, that then you get money back, you have a refund if less their expenses. I have to tell you, we haven't gotten a penny back yet.
Do they give you most of your money back, or does it all get applied to next year? How does that, or you don't even know because they haven't specified?
In the early part of this, about the time that we pulled out, the dominoes were starting to fall. The big guys were starting to say, no, I can't risk this. My employees, our insurance won't let us, our blah, 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 blah. And they were twisting their arms and saying, well, we'll give you, so much back as long as you agree to exhibit next year, or give you 50% credit toward next year, or sign a 3-year contract or something. They were trying to leverage it. And I appreciate they were in a difficult position. There's a lot of money involved in all this stuff, and a lot of that money goes to the convention center. It's not just NAB. It's not the organization that has the money.
It's a big machine. It's a big machine for all the economies, the hospitality, the unions out there, the NAB, organization itself, plus, all the ancillary revenue that comes in, the cab drivers and everything.
Yep. It's a huge deal. And, we've, over the 30 years, we've survived the SARS thing, and the .com failures, and the, 9/11 thing, and all these, cascading events that happened. But it wasn't that, even with the SARS, people weren't afraid to go to the show. This is totally different, and this is worldwide. And that was my message to NAB. As I said, look, guys, it's not your fault. It's not our fault. It's a pandemic. Let's figure out how to get through this, And yeah, we're a tiny company compared to some of the big guys. But all the big guys are hurting too, because they're not selling cameras. They're not, nobody's buying stuff. And, they could really use some of that refund money right now too, But yeah, it was obvious, the IABM helped the NAB do their NAB Express, that whole online type of virtual thing, but virtual trade show. But I don't personally, I don't see that being a real replacement long term. I mean, first of all, NAB is what, 1,500 exhibitors or something like that. It's huge, um, and just getting 1,500 exhibitors to make virtual booths and post a bunch of stuff, and then you have to organize it in a manner that people can search through it and figure out what they want to look at and spend time on. um,
I know that every year I would look at the NAB attendance. I would do a big presentation for my user group, and I would always look at the attendance figures. And I knew over the past 10 years, the attendance pretty much was on a slight downward trend. I mean, were you looking at those and saying, I don't know if, we need to do this or not? I'm not sure if it's still worth it.
well, we did actually downsize from a 400 square foot booth to a 200 square foot booth. We had a freestanding with the hanging sign and all that stuff for, I don't know, 5 years, I think. And we went back down to 10 by 20 because, being there and having a place to meet people and talk to them and all that stuff was more important than, you know, the physical big blah blah.
Because Apple had a very big presence in the early, Final Cut days, and they had a huge booth and they generated a huge amount of traffic. And probably I would say at their peak of popularity, they decided, we're not going to do the show anymore. I mean, how did you look at that move? Did you look at that move at the time, if you remember, and be like, oh, that's interesting?
They took half of the lower or a fourth of the lower hall, South Hall. Um, I think to me, more concerning or that bothered me more was when some of the big broadcasters pulled out, like ABC and NBC, and some of those guys said, no, we're not going to send as many people anymore. That was kind of telling that they didn't see the value in those people going, spending all that money to attend even. Just last year, was it, or the year before, Red pulled out. In their defense, they said, well, we're going to spend our money on Cinegear because that's where our real customer base is. It used to be, that being a small company, we always thought, well, we can't compete with the big guys on glitz and all that kind of stuff, right? But it used to be that people would shop for the small companies, and it was kind of like, going the back alleys of St. Thomas or something. They were looking for the little shop that had oh wow, look at this, I found this, widget or whatever. And that was kind of an interesting phenomenon that they really did like finding the small companies, and not, after you figured out what the new thing from Avid was and the new thing from Sony and whatever, then you were, going to go look for what's new. I can remember some of the NABs having some of the press come through that, our trade magazines come through and say, what's new? We're looking for something with sizzle. That there wasn't, it was just kind of more of the same this year. There wasn't anything,
It's conceivable, and I think you hinted to this previously, but it's conceivable, looking at your roadmap for the next 6 months, that you may not be at any trade shows, right? Do you do Cinegear normally?
Yes.
You do. So is Cinegear been canceled at this point?
I don't know if the show has, but we're not going.
So you're not going to go to Cinegear. You go to IBC. I've seen you at IBC, and I do like that show. And I don't know if I've heard anything, but have you pulled out of that show as well?
Yes.
Okay, so looking at your, sort of 6 month roadmap now, you're not going to be at any shows. These shows may not be happening, and I'm guessing not. But so, how does that change your marketing plan?
We'll be spending a lot more money with Google ads, and electronic type stuff like that. We discovered that Google ads actually work. Um, I always thought I'm not one that clicks on those, or at least I don't think I do. But Yeah, if you're looking for something, they're pretty handy to, hey, you're looking for that. Here's a guy that sells that kind of stuff, that pops up, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. Um, I have to say that looking behind the curtain and what they do is very interesting. That they've got it down to real science, behind all that stuff. And we started doing those back in the fall, and um, and we did see a boost in sales because of that. We'll be doing more things like that. It's not, there's a difference between attending a trade show and exhibiting at a trade show. Last year we did not have a Cinegear booth. I just attended. I had several meetings set up. Um, I when I say I pulled out of IBC, I pulled out of exhibiting, uh, because you know again the safety issue, but in that case it was more of um, a financial decision because they one of their deadlines was coming up toward the end of this month. Is if you don't cancel before then it's 50%, instead of 25% or something. And
Okay, so you're making decisions based on financial impact of waiting or not waiting
right.
to see what happens.
If by June we have a vaccine and it's safe and everybody can go, blah 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 blah, yeah, we'll probably send somebody to IBC. One thing that I think is interesting right now is with like NAB, they always, and people probably don't know this either, is that they have you sign up ahead of the actual show for next year. So they were pre-selling 2021 booths, or would have been, in March, um, getting you to sign contracts, and the first deposit was due right after the show was over. And there's none of that going on right now. Um, so I don't know what they're, you know,
Like everything that's being impacted from this COVID-19 virus, I think people are going to start to evaluate every aspect of work in terms of travel. Like, do we need to travel to do a face-to-face meeting, or is these Zoom conferences good enough? Can we
yeah.
still get our job done? So I think everything from a business standpoint is on the table. Will you take this sort of 6 month period and evaluate your ongoing plans, or are you already committed, like for NAB for next year? Like you're decided you're going to go and just see what happens.
Like I said, there's been no contracts for 2021 right now anyway. Um, the way the trade shows generally work for signing up for booths is you get points for how many square feet you had in the past. And well, you continue, and if you keep going year after year, you acquire more points, and that gives you priority in choosing your place, and where your booth's going to be and that kind of stuff. If you wait till later, my point is that if you don't sign up before NAB show ends, that in the past, this is the way they did it. If you don't sign up by the last day of NAB, then the price goes up per square foot. And so the longer you wait to contract the space, the more expensive it becomes. I think a lot of companies, I know we are taking a wait and see attitude about the whole thing. But I think your question is, how important is the show to us? And it's important from a networking standpoint, but honestly, I can make those appointments without having a show floor presence. Um, it just gives you a convenient place to hook up with people. Um,
Do you see any trends happening in this kind of work from home production business that you're going to try to adapt into your products?
we're definitely going to do some more things along the cloud line of things, but a good chunk of our business is people that we're in the acquisition portion of the whole thing, and so you got to go run around in the jungle of Africa to go shoot stuff, and that's not going to change. You got to take a camera and being on set and some of that stuff maybe. that'll change a little bit, but I think, it's all about, you know, speed and what makes sense. I don't see the cameras anytime soon getting to be a direct upload to the cloud or direct, that kind of thing. I think it's still, because they have to have the really fast media locally, that it's still going to be a transfer process of some kind to get from that to, their ingest point. I wouldn't want to be selling the hard disks, though. I wouldn't want to be Seagate or Western Digital, because I think that's plateaued. I think you're going to see that, that's not going to increase. Cloud is definitely going to be here to stay, just because of the convenience and all that stuff. But a lot of it's cost prohibitive for long term. So you have to make a balance between all those things. How long do you need it?
I know from my own production business, we're looking at ways to try to adapt, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Um, Dan, thanks for taking some time to talk about our industry and its future.
I wish I had the crystal ball. I don't have it. Do you?
Or a vaccine.
Or a vaccine. It'll come back in some form. I just think that in the end, if nothing else, we've learned that, we do need to take, sanitation and cleanliness, and being a little more careful about who you shake hands with and washing your hands and all that kind of stuff. You're going to see a drop in flu stuff probably, and things like that.
I would hope that that's the very least that comes out of this, is that we're cleaner as a society.
But how are the trade shows going to happen? I don't know. I think that somewhere along the line, it's probably going to take a little different format, to be a little more social distancing, but yet have that ability to go shop around and see things, just not get shoulder to shoulder.
As an attendee, I can say that I like going to, I go to NAB and I go to IBC almost every year, and there's some local ones that I go to, but I like going for the reasons that you said. It's the networking part. It's some things you need to physically see and touch, not just see a picture or a video on YouTube. And that part of it, I think, still has value, but I do think perhaps the scale, as you said, the scale is going to have to change. It might be smaller. And
Well, when we started this business, there was Video Expo. Do you remember that show? Well, they did half a dozen of them around the country, and they were about the size of one of the halls at NAB, something like that, or three-fourths of one or something. But that might be the future. That might be, instead of one big massive thing, having smaller regional type events. I don't know. We'll see.
well, Dan, I don't know when I'll see you in person again, but again, thank you for sharing some of your insight and certainly your time. And we'll hopefully see you at a trade show soon.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
And now, for a different perspective on NAB, I turn to my next guest, Lou Lita, who at this moment we should be in Las Vegas preparing for NAB 2020.
Absolutely. Bags would have been packed, cash counted, credit cards unmaxed, ready to go.
Yeah, we would have been golfing tomorrow.
Correct.
And then we'd have many days and nights filled with tequila and equipment and Gordon Ramsay.
It would have been succulent, satisfying, and smoking good time.
Wow, I like that. The three S's. So we're not obviously at NAB, and I was speaking to someone that you know as well, Dan Montgomery from Imagine Products.
Yep, Imagine Products.
Dan actually was probably the first person I knew who withdrew as a exhibitor at the conference.
Right, that's right. He was one of the first. I remember
prior
that, yeah.
to the NAB show being canceled. But I was talking to him about whether from the exhibitor, from his perspective as an exhibitor, if he felt the show would have a future. And, he did have some mixed feelings on it, and, basically said that, he doesn't justify the show just from sales, because it doesn't really work out to be effective that way. But he looks at it more like it's business development, it's relationships, it's
branding,
networking.
image.
Where do you fall on the value of the show as an attendee?
Well, it's almost like, in life, what is absolutely necessary? I mean, if you strip it down, you need food, air, water, shelter, and you could exist, but is life not worth living and partaking and enjoying what's available to you, whether it's travel or meeting other people or just changing scenery? So, I look at it in some ways, it's a kind of a tradition, something to do every year, and, have purpose, have reason, certainly have fun and golf and have nice meals and catch up with friends. But, we are in this industry, and it is ever changing, and certainly will be changing even more dramatically after everything that's going on right now. So this decision isn't up to me. I mean, I'm just a guy that makes a living with a video camera, but I'd hate to see it go away, but
yeah, if you had to think about it strictly, because I agree with you, it is more than just going to see equipment. It's more than just, going to Las Vegas. It's a combination of things that make the event work. And I think most attendees and even some exhibitors would fall into that category, as, Dan Montgomery did share earlier. But if you had to evaluate it, strictly on your ability to use it to make business decisions about equipment, and buying or renting or not buying, where does it fall?
I would say I could survive. My business could survive. I could make decisions without ever going again. There's just so much information readily available. I know so many people, including yourself. And I mean, everybody brings their own bit of knowledge to this business. And, I certainly can ask any number of people, hey, what did you hear about this? And maybe they knew somebody that knew somebody. So, we can gather information without having to fly to Las Vegas to do it. So, from that regard, I think I could continue to prosper without ever going back to NAB. That doesn't mean I wouldn't want to, because I do enjoy it. And I know, having gone for so many years, I always left NAB kind of reinvigorated, seeing equipment, seeing all the demos and all the new technology and all the possibilities. It's kind of like a reset button, and you kind of get, fired up. You see all this amazing, incredible, creativity in front of you, and you kind of want to go and have a piece of that.
I would actually put a little more importance for me to see equipment, to see the latest things, to be able to see them firsthand, because honestly, I don't trust a lot of these YouTubers.
Oh, well, yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, like, I wouldn't just go buy a camera without ever having seen it.
If NAB were to, come back next year, which I expect it to, but let's say that NAB came back in a different type of scenario. Maybe they didn't have all the camera manufacturers. Maybe there was less exhibitors. Maybe there were more, social distancing requirements. Would you still, go? Would that still be appealing?
I guess I would have to see the state of affairs at that, maybe say next January, February, to feel comfortable. I mean, there's no doubt that, the way we look at everything we've done in our life up to this point is going to change until we feel like we're back to normal. And it's hard to say what normal is right now, just because we're right in the middle of things. I wouldn't rule it out. Again, I enjoy travel. I enjoy a change of scenery, and I do enjoy, running into a lot of people that I know and seeing the equipment. So, I certainly wouldn't rule it out.
So let's say it is now April 2021. There's no there's no vaccine for COVID-19.
Mm.
People are still practicing social distancing. It's a little more relaxed, but there's no vaccine at this point. How do you feel about, getting on a plane and going to a trade show with potentially 100,000 people?
I'm not really feeling great about it, because I would assume we'd be in similar circumstances unless, I get tested and I've already determined I've had it, or, I'm not vulnerable to it. Again, I think this is still kind of a work in progress. I would say I would lean towards not.
I'm not sure what your buying plans were, but has the whole COVID-19 put a halt on capital expenditures for digital video and consulting?
I would say yes. I mean, right now, I have had a couple of projects and been fortunate to have gotten some work done and some billing, and I do have some outstanding invoices that, theoretically will be paid. But at this point, I'm being cautious. Now, that doesn't mean that I may not have to reevaluate my business and maybe buy equipment or buy some technology that I'm not even aware of at this point, to continue to do business. So, but there was really nothing super duper pressing for me to buy. I'm always looking for storage. I'm always looking at, lighting, audio, maybe lenses, but, I'm pretty satisfied with the equipment I have right now. So it's not like, sometimes I try to go to NAB with the attitude, I don't know what I don't know. And when I get there, maybe there's going to be something I know that I'll go, hey, you know what, maybe I need this, or, hey, this is cool. Like I did that, I think with you a couple of years ago, I discovered that Edelkrone slider.
Right.
And I bought it on the spot, and
right.
I've loved it, and it's worked really well for me. So I always expect something like that to pop up, but there was no big major capital expenditure on the books for me.
Well, I will say I have watched a few of these webinars, and I will say that if we're going to have to live with this for a while as the mode of disseminating information about products, that the producers of said webinars should bring their A+ game, because if you don't have it really dialed in, I feel the tolerance for technical ineptness is very low. Very low. Like for example, I watched one yesterday about a streaming encoder and decoder set. And they had someone from New Jersey and they had someone in Sweden, and they couldn't get the stream to be solid from Sweden. And
so they were trying to promote their own product by using their own product? Is that what you're saying?
I believe they were, but even if they weren't, like if you're selling a streaming product, even if you're not using it, you better be able to pull off a stream or your credibility goes way down.
Yeah, you're undoing everything you think you're trying to do.
Yes. Well, on that note, Mr. Lulita, I will bring this podcast to a close. Thank you for chiming in with your opinions on the NAB show. Thanks to Dan Montgomery for his opinions on his perspective as a exhibitor. And I don't know when we'll see each other physically. We'll probably see each other on Zoom soon, but it's the state of the state that we're in.
Exactly. And as always, it's been stirring, splendid, and superb.
Wow, look at that. You brought
I leave you with
full
that.
circle.
Full circle, bookends,
wow.
baby.
Wow, you better get on the road.
You know, when there's a will, there's a way.
Do you have something to say? Drop me an email at thisweekinproduction@gmail.com. Or even better, call our new TWIP voicemail box and leave us a message. 601-564-TWIP. That's 601-564-8947. Also, a reminder that This Week in Production is available on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify, iTunes, and Google Play. So please subscribe to get every episode. Lastly, if you like what you hear, would you mind giving me a rating or a review? I'd appreciate that. Okay, that's a wrap on This Week in Production. Thanks for listening.